The snow fell in thick, silent curtains over Silverton, Colorado, as 25-year-old Ellie Monroe sat alone on a frozen bench at the edge of town. The bus stop shelter offered little protection from the wind that cut through her thin coat like a blade. Her fingers had gone numb 20 minutes ago. She didn't care. In her pocket was a letter. In her heart was a hole that hadn't been there 3 hours ago. Mrs. Margaret Hayes passed away at 9:17 p.m. The night nurse had said, her voice careful, rehearsed. She went peacefully, in her sleep. Peacefully, as if that word could possibly contain the weight of what Ellie had lost. As if peacefully could explain why the only person who had ever treated her like family was now lying in a hospital morgue while the rest of the world counted down to midnight. The last bus to Denver had left at 8 p.m. Ellie knew this. She'd watched it pull away from the same stop dozens of times over the past 2 years, its taillights disappearing into the mountain darkness. She wasn't waiting for a bus. She wasn't waiting for anything. She was just here, existing, crying in the kind of silent, frozen way that happens when tears have nowhere else to go. That's when the headlights appeared. The vehicle was a Range Rover. A Range Rover, black and expensive, and utterly wrong for a town like Silverton on a night like this. It slowed as it approached the bus stop, then rolled to a complete stop. Engine idling, wipers pushing away the snow. Ellie watched it with detached curiosity. In her 2 years in this town, she'd learned that strangers didn't come to Silverton in winter. The road from Denver was treacherous. The town had nothing to offer except abandoned silver mines and a population of 637 people who mostly kept to themselves. The driver's door opened. A man stepped out, tall, dark-haired with silver at the temples, wearing a wool coat that probably cost more than Ellie's monthly rent. He moved with the exhausted precision of someone running on fumes and determination. "Excuse me," he called over the wind. "Do you live here?" Ellie looked at him, looked at the car, looked at the snow accumulating on his expensive shoes. "Why?" The man took a step closer, then stopped, seeming to realize how this looked. A stranger approaching a lone woman in the middle of nowhere at nearly midnight. "We're lost," he said, "and out of gas. The GPS died an hour ago. I've been driving in circles, looking for anyone who might know where to find a gas station." "We!" As if on cue, the back doors of the Range Rover swung open and 4 boys tumbled out in a chaos of winter coats and complaints. "Dad, it's freezing. I told you we should have stopped earlier. My feet are numb. Is this a gas station? This doesn't look like a gas station." The man, their father, turned with the weary patience of someone who had answered the same questions for the past hour. "It's not a gas station. Get back in the car." "But you said back in the car." The oldest boy, maybe 10 or 11, herded his brothers back inside with practiced efficiency. The second oldest shot his father a look of pure adolescent disdain. The 2 youngest went without protest, too cold to argue. The man turned back to Ellie. "I'm sorry. 4 boys, 6-hour drive, empty tank. It's been a night." Despite everything, the letter in her pocket, the grief sitting on her chest like a stone, the cold that had seeped into her bones, Ellie felt something shift. 4 boys lost in a blizzard on New Year's Eve. "The gas station closed at 6 o'clock, she said. "Won't open until tomorrow. The nearest one that might be open is in Durango, but that's 50 miles on a mountain road in this weather." The man's jaw tightened. He looked at the Range Rover, at his sons visible through the fogged windows, and Ellie saw something cross his face that she recognized. Fear. The kind that came from having people depending on you and no way to protect them. "Is there a hotel, anything?" "Closed for the season. Everything's closed. So we're stuck." It wasn't a question. Ellie nodded. "Anyway." The man ran a hand through his snow-covered hair. He looked at the sky, at the relentless white coming down, and let out a breath that fogged in the frigid air. "Okay, we'll sleep in the car. It'll be cold, but we have blankets." "No." The word came out before Ellie had decided to say it. "It's minus 15 degrees. With wind chill closer to minus 25. Even with the engine running, you'll burn through whatever gas is left in an hour. Then you'll be trapped with 4 kids and no heat. That's not surviving until morning. That's hypothermia." "Then what do you suggest?" Ellie hesitated. She thought about Margaret, about the letter in her pocket, about the house that sat empty now, 3 blocks away, filled with books and memories, and a life that had ended 3 hours ago. Then she thought about those 4 boys in the car. The youngest ones probably too young to understand the danger. The older ones, old enough to be scared, but pretending not to be. She had grown up in foster care. She knew what it felt like to be a child with no one looking out for you. I know a place, she said. It belonged to someone who passed away tonight. It has a wood stove, food, beds. It has heat. The man stared at her. You're offering to let 5 strangers stay in a dead woman's house. Would you rather freeze? A pause. Then the man laughed. A short, exhausted sound. I'm Nathan, he said. Nathan Aldridge. Ellie Monroe. Ellie. He said her name like he was memorizing it. I don't know how to thank you. Thank me by getting your kids out of the cold. Margaret Hayes' house was small, wooden, weathered by 50 Colorado winters, but warm. The key turned easily, and the door opened to a living room that smelled of lavender and old books and something Ellie couldn't name. Home. Maybe the kind of home she'd never had. Careful of the step, she said, ushering them inside. The floorboard on the left. The oldest boy stepped on it. It groaned loudly. Creaks, Nathan said. Ellie smiled despite herself. Nathan was last through the door, carrying the youngest boy, Lucas, she'd gathered, who had fallen asleep on the walk over. He set the child down on the worn couch with surprising gentleness, then looked around the room. It's not much, Ellie said, feeling oddly defensive. It's perfect. Nathan's voice was quiet. He was looking at the fireplace, at the walls covered in photographs and children's drawings, gifts from Margaret's students over 35 years of teaching. It feels like someone actually lived here, not just existed. Ellie didn't know how to respond. She busied herself with the wood stove, building a fire until flames crackled and warmth began spreading through the room. Lucas, the youngest, 5 years old, with dark hair and sleepy eyes, stirred on the couch. Where are we? Somewhere safe, Nathan said. Go back to sleep. But it's almost midnight. You said we could watch the fireworks at the cabin. Change of plans, buddy. Lucas's face crumpled, not quite crying, but close. We never do the cabin anymore, not since Mom died. The room went still. Ellie saw it, the way Nathan's shoulders tensed, the way the other boys suddenly found the floor very interesting, the way the word Mom hung in the air like something fragile and sharp. The cabin will still be there tomorrow, Nathan said, his voice carefully even. Right now, we're guests in this nice lady's house, and we need to be grateful. But, Lucas, enough. The boy fell silent, but his eyes, dark and wounded and too old for 5, stayed fixed on his father with something that looked like accusation. Nathan turned away. Is there somewhere I can? Kitchen's through there, Ellie said. I'll heat up some soup. 20 minutes later, the boys were fed and beginning to droop. Bennett, the second oldest, had claimed the pull-out sofa. The 2 youngest, Theo and Lucas, were half asleep on the floor in front of the fire, wrapped in quilts that Ellie had found in Margaret's linen closet. Only Oliver, the oldest, the serious one, the one who watched everything with eyes that missed nothing, remained awake, sitting cross-legged by the bookshelf, pretending to read a copy of Charlotte's Web that was clearly too young for him. Nathan stood at the window, looking out at the snow. She passed away tonight, he asked without turning around. The woman who lived here? Ellie nodded, though he couldn't see her. 3 hours ago at the hospital where I work. Family? No. The word came out rougher than she intended. No family, she was alone. Now Nathan did turn. His expression was unreadable. But you were with her. I was her nurse for 2 years. That's not what I asked. Ellie looked at the photographs on the wall. Margaret young and laughing. Margaret with her second-grade classes. Margaret standing in front of this very house on some long-ago summer day. She was the closest thing to family I ever had. Ellie said quietly. I didn't know that until tonight. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the letter. Cream-colored envelope. Margaret's shaky handwriting spelling out her name. She left me this, and I found out. Her voice caught. I found out she might have been my great-grandmother. That she had a daughter 47 years ago who she gave up. That daughter had a daughter, and that daughter, my mother, had me. And I ended up here taking care of her for 2 years, and neither of us knew. Nathan was silent for a long moment. You found your familiar family, he said finally, and lost her on the same night. Yes, I'm sorry. So am I. The fire crackled. Somewhere outside, distant and faint, the sound of fireworks drifted over the mountains, probably from Durango 50 miles away, muffled by snow and distance. Theo, the 6-year-old, stirred by the fire. His eyes opened, unfocused at first, then sharpening as he registered the sounds. Fireworks, he whispered. He scrambled to the window, pressing his face against the cold glass. The other boys woke too, drawn by his movement, and suddenly all 4 of them were crowded at the window, watching the faint flashes of color bloom over the distant peaks. Mom used to hold me during the fireworks, Theo said softly. She said the loud ones were the sky celebrating. No one responded. Nathan stood apart, watching his sons watch the fireworks. His face was carefully blank, but his hands, clenched at his sides, told a different story. Ellie moved without thinking. She crossed to where Theo stood and crouched beside him. Can I tell you something? She said. Theo looked at her, wary but curious. The lady who lived in this house, her name was Margaret. She was a teacher. She taught second grade for 35 years. And she told me once that fireworks aren't just for celebrating. They're for remembering. Every spark that goes up is someone we love, shining so bright that for just a second, they're back with us. Theo's eyes went to the window, to the faint blooms of pink and gold. You think my mom's up there? I think if she loved you, and I'm sure she did, then she's everywhere you look for her. Theo was quiet, then slowly he leaned into Ellie's side. Across the room, Nathan watched, and Ellie saw something in his face that hadn't been there before. Something cracked open, raw, like a wound that had been closed too long. By 1 a.m., the boys were finally asleep. Lucas and Theo upstairs, Bennett on the pullout. Oliver curled in an armchair with a blanket pulled to his chin. The house had settled into that particular quiet of sleeping children and crackling fires. Ellie sat at the kitchen table, Margaret's letter spread before her, reading it for the 4th time. Nathan appeared in the doorway, 2 mugs in his hands. I found tea. She accepted one without thinking. The warmth felt foreign against her frozen fingers. You don't have to stay up, she said. You've been driving for hours. Can't sleep. He sat across from her, looked at the letter. May I? She hesitated, then pushed it toward him. He read slowly, carefully. When he finished, he set it down and was quiet for a long moment. March 15th, 1977, he said finally. And you were born March 15th, 1997, 20 years apart. Exactly. And you grew up in the Denver foster system, the same orphanage Margaret mentioned. Nathan looked at her. That's not coincidence. No, I don't think it is. So what are you going to do? Ellie stared at the letter, at Margaret's shaky handwriting, at the words her mother never stopped loving her. I need to find out for sure. I need records, birth certificates, adoption papers, anything that proves the connection. But the hospital records office is closed until January 2nd, and the orphanage records are sealed. I can help with that. Ellie looked up sharply. What? I have lawyers, investigators, people who can cut through bureaucratic red tape faster than you'd believe. If there's a paper trail connecting you to Margaret Hayes, they can find it. Why would you do that? You don't know me. You opened a dead woman's house to a stranger and his 4 kids on the coldest night of the year. You sat in a snowstorm crying alone, and when I asked for help, you helped. You hugged my son when he was missing his mother. Nathan met her eyes. I'd say you've earned a favor. This isn't a favor. This is my whole life. This is finding out who I am. I know. His voice was quiet now. When my wife died, I had to figure out who I was without her. It's been 3 years. I'm still figuring it out. He paused, looking down at his hands. Her name was Catherine. She died of lupus. Slow, then fast, then gone. She was the one who made everything work. The kids, the traditions, the holidays. She baked cookies at Christmas. She built blanket forts on snow days. She made every trip to the cabin feel like an adventure. And when she died, I buried myself in work. Hired people to do the things she used to do. Told myself I was coping. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. I wasn't coping. I was hiding. Ellie thought about the 4 boys sleeping in the other room. About the way Lucas had said, we never do the cabin anymore. About the distance between Nathan and his sons, visible even in the small moments. They miss you, she said. Not the cabin, not the traditions, you. Nathan's jaw tightened. I know. Oliver's been keeping a journal. He showed it to me last month. Page after page of all the ways I've failed them since Catherine died. He shook his head. I'm trying. This trip, the cabin, New Year's together. It was supposed to be different. A fresh start. And then I got lost in a blizzard and ran out of gas. Story of my life lately. He managed a small smile. But then I found you. And you found us a place to stay. And my son smiled at fireworks for the first time in 3 years. He paused. Maybe getting lost isn't always bad. Ellie looked at him. Really looked for the first time. Past the expensive coat and the tired eyes and the careful control. She saw a man drowning in grief he didn't know how to process. A father who loved his sons but had forgotten how to show it. a widower trying to rebuild something from the wreckage of his life. She saw herself. "I grew up in foster care," she said quietly. 14 homes in 18 years. I never knew my parents. Never had anyone who stuck around long enough to call a family. And then I came here to Silverton and I met Margaret, and she treated me like I mattered, like I belonged to someone. You did belong to someone, you belonged to her. I didn't know that. That's the worst part. I was with her for 2 years. 2 years of reading to her, talking to her, holding her hand, and I never asked the one question that might have changed everything. I never asked if she had family. I was afraid of the answer. Afraid to know she belonged to someone when I didn't belong to anyone. You couldn't have known. I should have asked. I should have. She stopped, pressing her palms to her eyes. I spent my whole life thinking I was alone, and I wasn't. I had family all along. I just didn't know it until it was too late. Nathan reached across the table, his hand covering hers. Warm, steady, present. "It's not too late," he said. "She's gone, but her story isn't. The truth is still out there, and I'm going to help you find it." Why? Because everyone deserves to know where they came from. And because he hesitated, then continued, because maybe helping you will help me figure out how to help my kids, how to stop hiding and start being their father again. Ellie looked at their hands, at the way his fingers wrapped around hers. This man, this stranger she'd met 3 hours ago, was offering her something no one had ever offered before. Hope. Morning came gray and cold, but the snow had stopped. Nathan's Range Rover sat in front of Margaret's house, buried under a thick white blanket. "Gas station opens at 8, Ellie said, standing on the porch with a cup of coffee she didn't taste. "You could make it to Durango by noon." Nathan stood beside her, watching the boys throw snowballs in the front yard. Lucas was shrieking as Bennett pelted him. Thea was building something that might have been a snowman. Oliver stood apart, watching his brothers with an expression Ellie couldn't read. "We're not going to Durango," Nathan said. Ellie turned to look at him. "What?" "The hospital records office opens January 2nd. That's 2 days from now. My team can have preliminary information before then, but you'll need to be here to verify it, to fill in gaps, to make official requests." He paused. "I'm not leaving you alone with this. Nathan, you have 4 kids. You promised them. I promised them we'd spend New Year's together. I didn't specify where." He turned to face her. "Oliver is old enough to understand that sometimes plans change for important reasons. The younger ones will follow his lead, and honestly, they seem to like it here better than any cabin." As if to prove his point, Lucas came running up to the porch, snow in his hair and joy in his face. "Dad, Miss Ellie, there's a piano inside, a real one. Can I play it?" Ellie felt something twist in her chest. Margaret's piano, the one she'd played for her students, for herself, for the empty rooms of a house that had been too quiet for too long. "Yes," she heard herself say, "you can play it." The next 2 days passed in a blur. Nathan's legal team, working from Denver despite the holiday, began pulling threads. By January 1st, they'd located the former administrator of the Denver Children's Home, now retired in Fort Collins. By January 2nd, when the hospital finally opened, they'd traced Sarah Hayes through the Colorado Adoption Registry. Ellie sat in a cramped office at Silverton Memorial, Margaret's medical file open in front of her. Nathan sat beside her, his phone buzzing with updates from his team. Sarah Hayes was adopted in 1977, he read from his screen. Family name Collins in Boulder. Changed her name to Sarah Marie Collins. And Nathan's expression shifted, something careful entering his eyes. She died in 1999. Car accident on I-25. She was 22. 22. 3 years younger than Ellie was now. Did she... Ellie's throat closed. She tried again. Did she have a daughter? 2 years old at the time of the accident. Father wasn't listed on the birth certificate. After Sarah died, the child was placed in state custody. Nathan paused. The Denver Children's Home, the same orphanage, the same system, the same cycle of loss and abandonment. "The child's name," Ellie whispered. "What was her name?" Nathan looked at his phone, then back at her. Eleanor Marie Collins, born March 15th, 1997 at Denver General Hospital. Mother, Sarah Marie Collins. Eleanor. Ellie's birth certificate, the original one, the one she'd seen once when she was 16, had said Eleanor Marie Collins. She'd always assumed Collins was a random surname assigned by the state. She'd never known it was her mother's name. Her mother, Sarah, Margaret's granddaughter, which meant Margaret wasn't just someone who had treated Ellie like family. Margaret was her great-grandmother, and they'd spent 2 years together without knowing. Ellie didn't remember leaving the office, didn't remember walking down the hallway, past the nurse's station, past the room where Margaret had died 4 days ago. She found herself outside in the cold, the hospital's brick wall rough against her back, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She'd had family, real family, not just the foster parents who'd taken her in for a few months before deciding she was too much trouble, not just the group homes that were too crowded to care, real blood family, a great-grandmother who had spent 47 years searching for the daughter she'd given away. And that daughter, Sarah, had grown up, had a child of her own, and died at 22 on a highway, leaving behind a 2-year-old who would grow up thinking she was completely alone in the world. The system had failed them, all of them. Margaret searching for Sarah, Sarah dying before she could find her roots, Ellie growing up without knowing she had any roots at all. And then, improbably, the system had brought Ellie to Silverton, to a job at this hospital, to Margaret's bedside. They'd found each other. They just hadn't known it. Nathan appeared beside her. He didn't say anything, just stood there, close enough that she could feel his warmth, far enough that she had space. She knew, Ellie whispered. Margaret. She suspected. The letter. She said she noticed my birthday, my background, the way I looked. She wondered if I might be connected to Sarah, but she never said anything. Maybe she was afraid of being wrong or afraid of being right. Ellie pressed her palms to her eyes. 2 years. 2 years of reading to her, holding her hand, telling her stories, and she died without knowing. She broke. Not quiet tears this time. Real gasping sobs that shook her whole body, that came from somewhere so deep she hadn't known it existed. She cried for Margaret, who had spent her life searching, for Sarah, who had died too young, for herself, the little girl who had grown up believing she was unwanted. Nathan's arms came around her. He didn't say anything, no empty words of comfort, no meaningless assurances. He just held her while she fell apart. And when the tears finally stopped, when she pulled back and wiped her face with frozen fingers, he was still there. "What do you need?" he asked simply. Ellie looked at him, this stranger who had become something else, something she didn't have a name for yet. "I need to bury her properly," she said. "A real funeral with people who knew her." "Okay, and I need to stay here, in her house, in Silverton." She left it to me, apparently. One of the few things she did have to leave. I'm going to live there, and I'm going to do something with it. What kind of something? Margaret spent her last months in a hospital. Sterile, cold, surrounded by strangers. Ellie paused. What if people didn't have to die like that? What if they could spend their last days in a real home, with warmth and dignity and people who actually cared? A hospice house, something like that. Margaret's home. I'm thinking for people who deserve better than dying alone. Nathan was quiet. Then he said, "I want to help." "You don't have to." "I know I don't have to. I want to. Call it an investment." He smiled. "Or call it an excuse to drive 6 hours and see you." "That's a terrible business model. I've made worse decisions." He reached out, took her hand. "I'm serious, Ellie. This week changed something. I don't know what we are, friends maybe, or something on the way to something else, but I don't want to lose it, whatever it is." Ellie looked at their joined hands, at this man who had stopped at a bus stop and changed her entire life. "Okay," she said. "Come back. Call. Drive 6 hours in blizzards. But Nathan," she waited until his eyes met hers. "I need you to promise me something. Anything. Those boys, Oliver, Bennett, Theo, Lucas, they need you more than you know. I see the way they look at you like they're waiting for their father to come back. So when you go to Denver, when you go back to work and meetings and everything else, don't disappear on them. Be there, present, even when it hurts." Nathan's expression shifted. Something cracked open behind his eyes. "I know," he said quietly. "I know I've been failing them. I've been so lost in my own grief that I couldn't see theirs." "Then see it now. That's all any of us can do. See each other and show up anyway." He squeezed her hand. "Deal." Valentine's Day. Ellie was hanging the last of the new curtains in the front room when she heard the car pull up. She glanced at the clock. 3:30 p.m. Nathan wasn't supposed to arrive until 6. Maybe traffic had been lighter than usual. But when she opened the door, it wasn't just Nathan standing on the porch. It was Nathan and all 4 boys. Oliver stood at the front holding a bouquet of flowers. Roses, pink and white and red, slightly crushed from the 6-hour drive. Bennett was carrying a box that was badly wrapped in silver paper. Theo had a card clutched in his fist. And Lucas was holding the silver bracelet. The bracelet Ellie had laid on Margaret's grave. The bracelet she thought was gone forever. "We made Dad go back for it," Oliver said, his voice solemn. "After the funeral, we knew you'd want it, and we figured—" He glanced at his brothers, then back at Ellie. "We figured if you were going to be part of our family, you should have family things." Ellie couldn't breathe. She looked from the bracelet to the boys to Nathan, who stood behind them with an expression she couldn't read. "They insisted," Nathan said. "The whole thing was their idea. The flowers, the bracelet, everything." "We voted," Bennett added. "It was unanimous." "What did you vote on?" Ellie managed. Lucas stepped forward, holding out the bracelet with both hands, his dark eyes serious. "We voted to keep you." Behind him, Theo nodded vigorously. "Dad said you're scared of being left, so we wanted you to know that we won't leave. Not ever. We're a package deal." Oliver said, "Dad and us, all 5, and we want you into the package." Ellie sank to her knees in the doorway, tears streaming down her face. She took the bracelet from Lucas's hands, felt the weight of it, the history of it, Margaret's hope, in Sarah's memory, and her own belonging, all wrapped in tarnished silver. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Say yes," Lucas said. "That's what Dad said to say." She laughed, a watery, broken sound. And then she pulled Lucas into a hug, and Theo piled on. And then Bennett was there, pretending to be too cool for hugs, but hugging her anyway. And finally, Oliver, the serious one, the watcher, wrapped his arms around all of them and held on tight. Nathan stood on the porch, watching his sons embrace this woman who had become somehow, impossibly, part of their family. "Yes," Ellie said, her voice muffled against Lucas's coat. "Yes to all of it. Yes to keeping. Yes to being kept." 1 year later, New Year's Eve. The bus stop at the edge of Silverton looked the same as it had the year before. Same bench, same shelter, same snow falling in thick, silent curtains. But everything else was different. Margaret's home had opened in October. 4 beds, 3 staff members, a waiting list of families who wanted their loved ones to die somewhere that felt like home. The first patient, a retired school teacher named Harold, who had no family, had passed away 2 weeks ago, surrounded by warmth and dignity, with Ellie reading Charlotte's Web aloud as he slipped away. Nathan had moved his company operations to Durango, an hour away, close enough to see Ellie every day, far enough to give them both space. The boys came up on weekends, and their laughter had become as much a part of Margaret's house as the creaking floorboard by the door. The wedding was planned for spring. Small ceremony, just family. Ellie would wear the silver bracelet, and Oliver would be the ring bearer, and Lucas had already announced that he was giving a speech whether anyone liked it or not. But tonight was just the 5 of them. Nathan and Ellie and the 4 boys who had become hers, standing at the same bus stop where everything had begun. "Why are we here again?" Bennett asked, stamping his feet against the cold. "Because this is where Dad found Ellie," Lucas said matter-of-factly. "Remember, she was crying and we stopped, and she let us stay in her grandma's house." "It wasn't her grandma's house then," Oliver corrected. "She didn't know yet, but it was always her grandma's house," Theo said. "Even if she didn't know, that's the point." Nathan looked at Ellie, smiled. "They've been rehearsing this conversation for the whole drive." I noticed. She looked at these boys, her boys now, legally and completely. The adoption finalized 3 months ago. At this man who had stopped at a bus stop and changed her entire life. At the town that had become her home. The house that had become her purpose. The family that had become her heart. "A year ago," she said, "I was sitting on this bench crying. I thought I was completely alone. I thought I'd lost the only person who ever loved me. And then Dad showed up," Lucas said. "And then Dad showed up." She ruffled his hair. "With 4 freezing boys, an empty gas tank, and no idea what he was doing." "I still don't know what I'm doing," Nathan said. "None of us do. That's not the point." "What is the point?" Ellie looked at the sky, at the snow falling soft and endless, at the faint glow of distant fireworks beginning over the mountains. "The point is that sometimes being lost is how you find home. Sometimes the worst night of your life leads to the best thing that ever happened to you. And sometimes," she reached out, took Nathan's hand, felt his fingers lace through hers. "Sometimes the stranger who stops to help becomes family." The fireworks burst overhead, pink and gold and silver, like the bracelet on her wrist, like the joy in her heart. "Happy New Year," Nathan said. "Happy New Year." Lucas tugged at her coat. "Mom, Ellie, are you going to cry this year?" She laughed, pulled him close, looked at her family, her real, true, found family, standing together in the snow. "No," she said, "this year nobody's crying alone." And they weren't. And so on that snowy New Year's Eve, two broken souls found each other and became whole. Sometimes the family you're searching for has been searching for you too. In the hush of a snowy New Year's Eve, where a single cry once echoed across a frozen bench, Ellie Monroe discovered that family isn't something you're born into. It's something you choose over and over, even when the world has taught you to expect abandonment. She had spent 25 years believing she was alone, carrying the invisible weight of a mother she never knew, a grandmother she never met, until a stranger's headlights cut through the storm and four boys tumbled out of a car, bringing with them chaos, warmth, and the kind of love that doesn't ask for permission to arrive. Nathan had been drowning in his own grief, a father who loved fiercely but had forgotten how to show it, until a toddler's outstretched arms and a woman's quiet courage reminded him that showing up is the bravest thing any of us can do. Together they rebuilt not just a house but a home, where grief was held, where children laughed again at fireworks, where a silver bracelet worn by generations became the quiet promise that no one would ever be left behind again. Because sometimes the family you've been searching for your whole life has been searching for you too, across miles, across years, across the silence of unspoken loss. And when you finally find each other, it isn't with fireworks or fanfare. It's with small, trembling choices. A door opened in a blizzard, a hand reached out in the dark, a whispered yes, when every instinct screamed run. That yes became everything. It became bedtime stories and shared blankets and the sound of little feet racing through a house that finally felt alive. It became Nathan learning to stay present, Ellie learning she was worthy of being kept, and four boys learning they could trust love to arrive and remain. In the end, what began as a night of tears on a bus stop bench became a lifetime of belonging, proof that even the coldest, loneliest moments can be the beginning of the warmest homecoming we'll ever know. What part of Ellie and Nathan's journey made your heart ache the deepest or hope the brightest? Have you ever been the person who opened a door in someone's storm, or been the one who finally found someone willing to stay? Share your own story of chosen family, second chances, or love that arrived when you thought it never would in the comments below. I read every single one, and they always leave me breathless with wonder. And if tales like this of grief transformed, strangers becoming forever, and the quiet miracle of being truly wanted move you the way they move me, hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and let's keep finding these reminders together. Sometimes the family we need most is the one that chooses us when we least expect it.